Okay, welcome to Life First Canada. I am Karen Klassen. If you're new to Life First Canada, we want you to leave your name in the chat and just let us know where you're from, say hello. We are focusing on solutions as we make our way across the bridge into a parallel reality where truth and freedom reign supreme. If you are seeking a tribe, please join us at lifefirstcanada.ca and become a private member. It is through your support that keeps us moving forward. What a powerful call we had last week. Protect the children, protect our future. It was a difficult conversation, but again, a necessary one. I know this conversation triggered a few people, and some people had no idea that this was actually happening in our country, in Canada. We need to see what's happening, no matter how angry or frustrated or stressful or sad it makes us. And then we need to focus on solutions. We need to see, what is happening. Of course, we also need to be with those perceived negative emotions. We need to feel our sadness. We need to go to the root of what that is. And we need to love ourselves, to have compassion for others, have compassion for those who are grieving for all that's happening in this world right now. And it's important to really then move into reflection for you to really step in to see what your soul is being inspired to do. Our soul's always calling us to take inspired action so that we can be a part of creating heaven on earth. Thank you to Hella and Croy last week from Croy from Gays Against Groomers for educating everyone. Again, it was a lively discussion. And I trust that many of our members are now joining in on the education forum with Hela, who has been facilitating it to really help create solutions for parents and teachers who are exiting the public school system. FYI, did you know that the traditional gay pride flag, the colors, are actually the same colors as our energy system, as our chakra system? It is. They just inverted it, right? Inverted the purple's now on the bottom and the red is on the top. Just thought that was interesting. Okay, we know that media is one big lie. The medical system is one big lie. And the legal system, the political system, and yet here we are, people still believing they have power in the voting system, voting today, hopefully going to change everything, right? Are people not aware that Canada is not a country, that is actually a corporation? I've had 3 people knock on my door to see if I'm going to be voting. I keep saying, no, I'm not. This is something people have not realized. A lot of people, you've realized, of course, but not a lot of people out there. And the question they need to ask themselves is, have you ever known of any corporation to vote in their CEO? No, we don't, right? A CEO is appointed. Our premiers are appointed. Our prime ministers are appointed. Presidents are appointed. So remember, everything in the public system is all about acting, right? They're all actors in that jurisdiction. Everything is theater. The whole voting system is theater. It's one of the biggest con games. Well, one of the biggest con games. The political parties are laughing at those who think they have a voice in their system, right? In the public system, all men and women we know, right, are fictional entities because they see us as a person, right, a fictional character. And when you, as a man or woman, joinder with that fictional character, all they do is feed off your life force energy. So we're giving our power away when we vote in their system. And as you know, I've said this many times, We are keeping that birth certificate system alive. We are here to reclaim our authority. Only a sovereign man or woman has the power in the public system, as you are then above it. Of course, those of you who are on the call are very wise men and women. All of our listeners are living men and women who are sovereign and reclaiming their own authority over their own lives. We know that this is a journey. We're all learning every single day. We only focus on becoming self-governing, taking responsibility, and not only taking responsibility for our own lives, this is also about relinquishing our fears. Relinquish all fear, right? Face everything and rise. Taking back our towns, our counties, because that's where our power is, right? In community. So taking back our towns, our counties through natural law, creative law, by reclaiming our unalienable rights. Now we know freedom is a higher state of consciousness, yet because of all the years of conditioning, it takes time to separate the legal fiction from reality, right? It does involve taking our life into a very new direction. It does involve change. It involves looking in that mirror every single day and telling yourself, right, that you are amazing, that you have the power to create the change, that we all have the power to create heaven on earth. Okay, everyone, breathe in life force energy. We know that our breath is life itself. I just want to let everyone know that I am so grateful to Laura Jane and Karen Hanna. They do so much work behind the scenes and keeping our members updated on Telegram. If it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be. So thank you to both of you. I am so deeply grateful. Thank you. Okay, so knowledge is key, and that is why we have our Monday calls. We're here to share knowledge, to share truth, and tonight we have Cal Washington, founder of InPower, here this evening to share his knowledge and wisdom. Welcome to the call, Cal. So grateful to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Karen. We booked it quite a while ago, and so yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent.
Great to see a large group of Canadians. Yeah, it's awesome.
We are so grateful. Our members they all have learning attitudes. Now, I know your movement's been a big part in creating positive change and, for men and women to reclaim their authority over their health and home. I would love for you to share your story and what inspired you to start InPower. I know there's quite a few of our members who are very familiar with who you are, but again, we have a lot of new members too. So yeah, the room is yours.
Yeah, so some of you may have heard this story before, but I still am just a normal guy. And although some people think I'm something else, but I'm just not. And I went through something that was extraordinary. So that's different, but I got immersed in the court, which is not that unusual. I questioned what I was experiencing pretty much from the beginning. It didn't sit right with what I thought Canada was and what I thought the courts were. Wherever I got these ideas from, the experience in the court was not fitting that. And so I tried to figure out what was going on in there. There was definitely an agenda going on, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It took years to actually come to the conclusion of what was actually going on. But I tried all kinds of different things from different teachers, Free Man on the Land, some of you may have heard of. I did the Paradigm course. I talked to a lot of people here, and I'm in Vancouver, and there was quite a contingent of people who were teaching alternate law, what would be considered anti-government or anti-tax or whatever it was. There was quite a bit here back then. This is going back about 20 years, and so I learned from all these people, went to all these meetings similar to this. They were more live. We didn't have Zoom meetings like this. So you had to go to a place and, and so we got together like that. I think once a month on Tuesdays. There would be about 100 people there, sometimes more. And so I tried everything that I could get my hands on, and I'd learn it and then try it in court. I had this, ongoing court battle that wasn't going to go away. And so it was a really good training ground for, looking back at the time, it was just a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. I went through the fear stage. I'm fearless now, but I was not. I can remember being at one of these meetings, and Irene Gravenhorst, some of you may know, she was up speaking, and I didn't know her then. This lady's up there going, when you're dealing with the police, you have to go over your fear of them. And I looked at this cute little lady, and I'm going, how do you do that? Like, how do you get over that? When the lights are behind you, and somebody with a gun is telling you to do this and do that. And I didn't think it was actually possible, because I just had this constant anxiety around it. I'm not an anxious person, but police, they definitely brought that stress up. I don't have that anymore. And so you can get from that fear stage, and we all start in some aspect of fear before you can move into what Karen was describing. So anyway, I tried a lot of things. Some had some success, most didn't. I got arrested, spent time in jail, like overnights, in and out of court. I was in court at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, sometimes twice in a week. It was really a part of my life, and it didn't seem like it was going to go away, because I wasn't complying, or at least they didn't think I was complying. And I also wasn't going to give up. Like I wouldn't, and they weren't going to give up. So there was going to be this tension in my life, and I couldn't see the end of it. There was no end to it. Like there was no, okay, we're going to get there and then it'll be over. So I tried a whole bunch of different things. Then I ran into a commerce thing up in Kelowna, went up there. It was just the next thing on the list to try. I mean, I'm just being honest. Okay, well, let's go see what this guy has to say, and then we'll try that. And so we did that, and I tried it. And the very first commercial move I made, the judge ran out of the room. And that was the beginning of the end. That was when the tide stopped coming in and started going out. So the waves were still coming in. So there was, there's action, but that was the turning point where it started to go out of my life. And so we thought, okay, that's a coincidence at first. And then okay, well, let's try it again. And we got, similar but different reaction of the judge. And then we just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And it became obvious that they were definitely reacting to what we were doing, and even talking on the TV, about it, and not about us, but, saying they have to up the bonds of the judges and all this stuff. And so we knew we were kind of hitting the mark. I got free of the court cases. One in particular, they did leave me alone from the whole time, but one of the driving ones, they stopped pursuing it for about 1.5 years. So I thought I was done. And then they arrested me at work on a long weekend. It was a Canada Day long weekend. They arrested me on the Friday, and Monday was the holiday. They wanted to see what would happen if they kept me for longer than just one overnight, because I had done a couple of overnights and just did, the bond thing and then rescind the thing. And, we were playing these paper games. But I had not been in a real prison type environment. It was more just holding cells. And the prosecutor even said, let's see what he's like on Tuesday morning. In other words, let's torture him and see if he changes his tune. Well, I didn't. So it took them 60 days, 2 months to get through a one-day trial, trying to get jurisdiction, and on and on and on. So I'll keep the story short, but at the end of it, they ended up owing me $300 million US. Because of the paper, the commercial things that we had become a lot more adept than when when that first time the judge ran out of the room. We got already put it, a couple of years of more study and more trial and error in. So trying to shorten the story even more, tried to collect the $300 million after I got out of my 60 days. We tried a couple of different things and they ignored it. I think we tried 2 different things and they just ignored it. Then we went to a seminar in New York and we got more in-depth commerce and procedures and some templates. And we came home, learned them, adapt. They were all Americans. So we had to, learn them for Canada and adapt them. And we looked up every word in it. We spent the time, we didn't just take a template, write our name in it. We actually looked up we went through line by line. It took us about 4 months and we learned it. So I was immersed in it. All 3 of us were. There's 3 of us doing this. I got it notarized after we had written it that it made sense for Canada. We got it notarized at the US consulate because I happen to be an American, born in Canada. We sent that in and there was some divine timing that we didn't know about until afterwards. But when we sent it in, it almost shut down the legislature in Victoria. They totally panicked. They announced in the news that they owed $300 million, which is exactly the paperwork we put in. They were on holidays at the time. They had to bring everybody back, all the MLAs back from holidays to deal with it. And it caused a real ruckus. And so then we knew we were really hitting it. Long story short, they didn't pay, but I escalated then to the federal level. And by the time I got through their process, the clerk of the Privy Council stepped down on the day he got mail. And that's when I can never be convinced that what I'm doing is incorrect, because that man had been the CEO of the Bank of Canada. He had also been involved with the IMF, and he was the highest position in Canada that's not elected. He did a press conference in the morning, didn't announce any retirement. The mail, we tracked the mail. The mail came late in the morning, like 11 o'clock, and he stepped down in the afternoon with no notice.
Bravo.
Yeah. So that's one thing. So long story short, I was set free from the whole system. They just left me alone after that. I've never been to court with my name on the docket since then. Then a friend of mine did a movie on smart meters, and he was showing it, and people were coming out very despondent because it was showing the problem with the smart meters and we're all going to die. And he knew about what happened here in BC because he was from here, and he phoned me and said, is there something you can do on this smart meters, like some kind of paperwork or whatever? And I looked at it and I went, yep, they're moving in commerce. It's all the commercial moves, tacit agreement. I said, yep, we can do that. So I adapted the $300 million document that we had sent in and almost shut down the legislature. We turned that into what is now called a notice of liability. And we got the same kind of results, people stepping down, etc. We had it out there for free where people could just take the document in a Word file and fill it out. And that caused a bunch of problems that we had to learn from. And we realized that we had to take some responsibility for that document because it was being misused. It was being changed for all kinds of different things that we didn't know about because the document was just sitting there. You could just download it. And people were also changing the document, the actual template, so that people came after them were getting an altered document. And we didn't know that. We were just trusting people. And then we realized, hey, this isn't what we had originally put out there. And we don't know who changed it and when and all that. It was just, it was a nightmare. So we had to rethink the whole thing and be able to figure out a way that this could go to scale. We want to do this on a very large scale worldwide. And so we had to have some automation. And so we launched last September. The first document started going out in November of last year, like maybe 1 or 2, couple of early birds, guys that are really keen. But the rest of us kind of started in January, and it's been gathering steam since then. And worldwide, we probably had, I'm guessing, around 10 people step down in the 4 months that we've been running, including as of yesterday, the the Premier of Western Australia.
Yes. Oh, gosh, that's how powerful a notice of liability is.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So off the top of my head, the ones who have received this that you've seen in the news that have stepped down is the head of the CDC, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Chrystia Freeland announced she may be resigning and going to NATO right after I sent to her. She's on my list. There's been numerous people in Ontario, somebody in Denmark, a couple of people in the United States as well that have stepped down. So yeah, it's taking off.
Fantastic. See, this is what we need to hear. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Okay. So the first thing you said was it's possible to overcome our fear of authority. I'm trusting everyone heard that.
I'm here to tell you that you can. And I was the one sitting in the crowd because I had already, I had dealt with the police quite a bit by then. And I looked at her and I said, how is that cute little lady saying that up there? Like, how do you get there? Like, how do you not be afraid? And I can tell you, you can get there. And I can tell you, it's to the point now that I don't even have much interaction with the police. And the last few times that I had, it's lasted for seconds, not even minutes. And the very last one I had 2 officers watching me get off the SkyTrain without a mask. Well, they didn't watch me, but they were at the entrance where I had to go walk by them. There's 2 of them standing together, a man and a woman. I walked by them. They didn't make eye contact with me.
You're not a person anymore in their system.
Or I can't explain what's going on, but there's this, these aren't the droids you're looking for kind of thing going on. And it's not been once or twice or 3 times. It's been a few times. So it's actually, there's something happening.
Yes, you're vibrating at a higher frequency. They can't see you anymore. I love it. I want to speak into the 300 million. Many people think that our court systems are just and our legal system has our back. Can you share your experience that led you to discover this hidden jurisdiction of theater of commerce?
The courts well, pretty much worldwide, but definitely in North America are corporations. And the best way to understand what they are is this the TV show Judge Judy. So Judge Judy is a judge, or can be a judge, or was a judge, but she is not a judge on that TV show. She is an actress. And anybody that comes onto that show has to sign an agreement that they will follow her things because she is not a judge. If you're not going to follow her orders, then you can't come on the show. That's the deal. So the courts are no different. It is a business. I had at least 2 judges blurt that out to me in their frustration. The court here in Vancouver, the Supreme Court and the provincial court, they're across the street from each other, downtown Vancouver. On the door, it says business hours, not court hours. So it is a business that offers court services. The people that are sitting there are judges or can be judges. They're qualified to be judges, but they're not always acting as a real judge. Sometimes they're acting like a judge. It's more of a charade. That's not quite the right word, but they're acting in a business capacity, not as a de jure judge from wherever the authority comes from in the country. This is seen, for those that really want to study the history of Canada. If you read the Hudson Bay Charter, you will see, and it's Old English, so you got to trudge through it, and you might have to read it a couple times. But the Hudson Bay Company, it wasn't called that, but that's its colloquial name. It was a monopoly corporation, but it was allowed to make its own laws and enforce those laws, and they were allowed to have courts. That tells you everything you need to know. So those courts were part of the company. Those courts could also hear, because they had actual judges in there, could also hear criminal and civil matters as well in the same building. But what their actual purpose was to enforce the laws of the corporation known as the Hudson Bay Company. And the Hudson Bay Company, for those of you who don't know, was pretty much the government, and they even said, you know, to have good government in this colony. And it ran for 200 years, longer than the iteration now. But it was a full-on monopoly, and everybody knew it. So they were allowed to have, they had use of the, this is all still British, they had use of the British Army, British Navy. They had jails, they had cannons, artillery, etc. on their forts. And this is a corporation. So if you read that and you understand, and you sort of glean the overall thing that's happening there, they were allowed to give licenses for, you know, put your canoe in the water, because they had any river that flowed into the Hudson Bay right to its source, that was their land. So that was called Rupert's Land. Rupert was a cousin of the king at the time. I think it was Charles II, and he had been banished, and he was a licensed pirate, a privateer. So he was a licensed pirate. He stole people's stuff on the open seas, probably killed people, and he was an alleged slave trader. So an alleged slave trader and pirate, known pirate, was the first governor here in what we now know as Canada. How do you think that went? And a bunch of his friends. It was plunder, 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 steal, steal, kill, kill, destroy. And it has not changed. They just changed the name of it. And so the courts, in my strong opinion, are corporate courts operating under the Hudson Bay Charter still, because there's some real problems with our Constitution and the British North America Act. But that document was signed by a king and can't be revoked, and it was perpetual succession. So that document can never go away, the Hudson Bay Charter. And so that's the courts that you're dealing with.
Oh my gosh, we remind everyone to, as a sovereign, to not go to court, because the legal actors will attempt to engage the person, right? For example, I was speaking with a woman today, and she shared that she knows a woman, one of her clients, who went to court, and she was doing great in regards to her sovereignty, speaking her truth, standing for her own, being a woman. And one of the police officers in the courtroom just came over to her and asked her to take the toothpick out of her mouth, because they wanted to be able to hear her better. And so she listened to him and put her toothpick down, and that is when they got her and they arrested her for listening. And so in the law of mankind, for mankind, they state that no man or woman has ever been in jail. That they can only put a person in jail, and they will poke and prod you until you have made a mistake and they find your blind spot. And we haven't been taught, right? That we cannot listen to them for one moment, and that it's up to us to bring the law. And so for you, and how you were able to get the judges running from the room, what pieces of knowledge did you have at that time that created that experience for you?
Well, because the court is a business, it's subject to a jurisdiction that is higher than it, which is commerce. And commerce, there's modern commerce, and there's the acts that govern commerce, but there's this ancient commerce, and it's very ancient, but you know, I try and teach it from the Middle Ages forward, but it goes back further into antiquity, into like I did a little thing on Hammurabi Code so people can understand. It goes way back into ancient Babylon, and they had sophisticated banking principles, but they didn't have currency yet. So who's teaching this? Put options and things like that. Like there's no way, like there's something more going on here. So this commercial system is very old, and I don't think it belongs in Earth. It came from somewhere else. There's a higher knowledge based on it, and it's a control system, no doubt about it. Money is a control mechanism. Our belief in money, and I'll just say it now, we're the only living entities that pay to live inside Earth.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. So true.
Right down to bacteria, we're the only one. So why is that? Because somebody has imposed it here and we believed it. You know, our ancestors did, and we were born into it, but we can't see it for what it is. So I try and jar people with that. We shouldn't be paying to live in here. This thing, whatever this is provides for every living species in a beautiful balance, and money has thrown it off balance. And so money is the root of the problem in here. I wouldn't say it's the root of the problem, but it's the mechanism that they're using to cause the chaos. Without it, they can't do it. Like they don't have the power to do it. We're way too powerful, but our belief in money is our downfall. And so that's how I was able to do it. I was able to understand how bonds worked from the ancient admiralty and from the law merchant, from the Middle Ages, commercial instruments. Now, this is not taught at law school. It's left for very elite. They understand all this, and this is how they've amassed such wealth. It's because they understand these ancient merchant practices.
Now, I know that in Power, you focus on the four main areas or the weapons that have, been forced upon the people, such as the forced V and smart meters you mentioned, and 5G, chemtrails. Let's just talk about contract, because you talk about contract in regards to the four elements of contract and how we have unknowingly contracted in commerce and how we have allowed this mess to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, but the simple thing is that a contract has to have four elements. One, the first thing is an offer. Somebody has to have something that they're offering, a product or a service, mostly. And then there has to be somebody that wants that product or service and agrees to undertake possession of that product or service. So there's always it has to be an offer. Then there has to be a meeting of the minds, like discussing what the cost of it is and the details, so that each party understands the transaction and it's clear, so that nobody gets taken advantage of. Then there has to be an actual acceptance. You have to say, yes, I will take your product. And then there has to be the actual exchange. It's usually with money, some kind of consideration or performance. So it means, in other words, the party that's offering the service goes and builds the house or whatever it is. So any kind of move towards actually performing the task, that's considered acceptance. So those are the four elements that have to be in a contract, otherwise it's not a contract. And then contracts can get way more complex than that, but those four elements are the essential things that you look for to see if there is an actual contract. In law merchant, among merchants, they have this thing called tacit agreement. And that's, I mean, you can find it, it's not like a myth or anything, but people tend to think that it doesn't exist or it's not enforceable, but they do it all the time. And that comes from the ancient times between merchants, and they have these understandings and these principles that they live by. So And here's the thing why it applies to each one of us is they turned us into a merchant with the birth certificate.
Yes.
And most people say they turned you into a corporation. But if you think about it, they turned you into a merchant. You will get closer to the truth and understanding exactly what's happening here. So now merchant customs apply to you, but they just didn't tell you that. So we're turning that around, that situation, and going, okay, if you've turned us into merchants, then we can act like merchants. In other words, we can do all your bills of exchange, your promissory notes. We can get you into a tacit agreement and reverse the tables, like ping pong it back.
Thank you. They've turned us into merchants.
So your merchant number is here in Canada is your SIN number.
Right. Yes.
And you'll notice that anything you do in commerce, what's your social insurance number?
Right.
You try and get a loan, bank, try and do anything, they want that number because that's your merchant number.
Right. And we've also said yes to the offer in regards to even 5G. If I look at my Shaw contract, 5G is in my Shaw contract. So there's a meeting of the minds, even though it's written in small print, I have accepted it because I signed for having Shaw in my home, for having cable or internet, whatever. And then the exchange of that, of their services.
Yes, but if you keep, even if you had a previous contract and you keep paying, even if they do change the contract, because you're a merchant, you're supposed to know this.
Okay, that makes
So as soon as you make the next bill payment, you've agreed.
right. Okay. So even then, when it was 3G and 5G wasn't even here, me just paying my bills allows them to upgrade to 5G, no problem.
Yes, and it's for those that are of a certain age, it's that remember when you in the comic books there was this record club, you can get a record for
exactly, for a
you
penny.
can get a record for 1 cent, and then all of a sudden they started sending you records
Yes.
at $10 a record, and they started sending you bills. That's law merchant, that's tacit agreement, that's all those principles work on that, and it's the same. It happens all over the place.
So my next question is, now we know that our dark lords of this realm are never going to be held accountable through us, possibly yes through the creator, but they're smart because they're using that law of karma, where they can do whatever they want to do as long as they tell us what they're going to do. So we know that celebrities and presidents and prime ministers, etc., anyone at a high level, they've never really been held accountable. The media tell us that they are, but we know that mainstream media is really, again, acting, and none of it's true. So how can we hold those in the lower tiers in this realm accountable? Are you saying that, in regards to the notice of liability, that is our #1 priority, that we need to learn how to create the right notice of liability and send that out?
What we've done is taken everything to those levels in contract. Part of law merchant is another thing called agency. Now, agency does not exist in admiralty. They'll let you talk about admiralty, but you'll see very few people talking about law merchant. And there's a reason. So this agency idea is how all the money and wealth and power rises to the top. But the liability can go to the top as well. And that's why they have limited liability things to try and block it. But at a certain level, none of that exists anymore. So because if you operate above, limited liability corporations operate, like if you're in the jurisdiction above that, it doesn't cover that. And then if you go to what people would call off-planet or spiritual jurisdictions, the Bible in Ephesians 6, it talks about we wrestle not with flesh and blood. So it's saying it's not tangible, touchy things. We're dealing with principalities, rulers, powers. And if you can start to understand that, the root word for principality And notice the agent is, and notice the principal is the same thing. So what's happening here with the smart meter and some politician is affecting a principality in the spirit room because of agency. They set this up so we can actually tie that whole spiritual end to these weapons being deployed here in Earth on a 3D level. So it operates
Multidimensional.
multi-jurisdictional.
Thank you. Now, can you share more in regards to Canada and the Constitution? Because a lot of people think that the Constitution is going to save us, but yet
No.
it's been ratified. I believe Canada doesn't have a Constitution.
No, we don't have a constitution. So the only non-native document that allows any authority from what I can see is the Hudson Bay Charter.
Right. Okay.
That's what they're operating under. And then when Trudeau passed that Emergencies Act, I knew that he knew that, and that's why he's so smug and arrogant. You guys can talk about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms all you want. He knows it's not passed because his dad was involved with that, and so that's why he sits there like, yeah, go ahead. Doesn't exist in his head. But I said, yeah, but if that's how you're operating, then you must be operating under the Hudson Bay Charter, and in there it says you can pass your own laws, including the Emergencies Act, as long as they're not repugnant to the common law. That's in the document too. That's repugnant to the common law. And then all of a sudden, Chrystia Freeland is, oh, I think I'm going to step down from being here, and I'm going to go to Belgium and join NATO. But her position doesn't come up until November, so she's stuck. I'm just going to keep sending her bills.
Good.
Trudeau also did a 180 and was going, I never forced anybody.
Yeah, right.
Right after we sent him documents.
Amazing. Okay, I just have one more question, and that is, we'll have two more actually. How can we limit our 5G exposure?
I started with orgone generators because during my court days, every time I was going to appear before court, about 3 days before, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I thought it was anxiety, and I was just vibrating, and I couldn't, literally could not sleep. And then I asked my daughters who were living with me, I said, are you guys sleeping? No, Dad, it feels like there's vibrations going through. And I'm like, what? And I didn't tell them I was having that experience. So I went, something's happening to my house, because they're experiencing it too. So there's something actually happening in here. And I didn't really believe in all that stuff, but I did then. And I didn't believe in orgone generators before that either. And but I knew a couple guys who were doing them, so I thought, well, I'm going to give this a try. And I went to a guy in Richmond and got a couple, and he said, put them around your house, bury them in the ground, and with intention. And I'm like, intention, okay, set up like a bubble around your house, protect from that. And so I did it. That evening, I was sitting in the living room with my daughter, and the whole atmosphere inside the house started changing. I'm like, what's going on in here? It became like heavy to breathe even. Wasn't like struggling, but it was like something was happening physically. And my daughter felt the same thing. She goes, Dad, what's going on in there? There's stuff going up and down my back. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? And just like everything else, I was just try things. And then when I saw the reaction, oh, okay, I better investigate. So anyway, I studied orgone generators, and then I started making them myself, got deep into it, very deep. Then at a certain point, studying sacred geometry and frequencies, I started to understand that this thing that I'm in is the best orgone generator ever made. It has all the phi ratios everywhere. It has all the elements of an orgone generator, and I still have them around. This is one I made, but I'm in one. So he sets up screens and paints and all the stuff to block EMFs. So he came in here with his tester, and I live in an old house. There's people living above me and people living below me, and everything's Wi-Fi in here. And he came into my area. So I'm in between. So wherever the router is, it's not in my suite. It has to go through here. And he came in here and he couldn't find anything. I have 2 smart meters on my bathroom wall. So I said, go test in the bathroom. He goes, there's nothing in here. He came in here with the computer on. He goes, there's a little bit here, and he says, it's got to be your prayers or whatever is going on. So I don't know how to explain how to get that to happen, because I didn't really intend for it to happen. I liken it to, there's a Bible verse in Mark where it says, these signs will follow those that believe. And one of them is they'll pick up, if they drink any deadly poison, it won't harm them. Like, I wouldn't go into fear about it. Don't be foolish about it either. That's why it's hard for me to tell you what to do, because I don't know what I did.
It's all good. Thank you. My last question is, and you opened the door here, so I'm just going to walk through. Now, in regards to the Bible, I'm not a religious person. I'm more spiritual. However, I think that, a few of our listeners too want to have this conversation as well. So, like, I know there's many books that they took out of the Bible, the Book of Enoch and Book of Thomas. What is your belief in regards to where we come from? We talked about the Anunnaki. What is your take?
Well, I go with the Bible story from like Genesis and then the Book of Enoch mostly, as far as our origins. We are fairly recent, according to the Bible. Like, if you just read it literally without a bunch of extra stuff added on. And I think we were put here to settle an ancient claim of a being that wants to overthrow the true creator.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can look at that any way you want. It all kind of plays out that way. The Book of Enoch gives some key things about how it works to get the judgment. If you want, like you were discussing, how do we get these things to how do we get rid of them in front of God? Mm-hmm. So the Book of Enoch, chapter 9, talks about the events that led up to the flood, which was a judgment. And man, in particular Enoch, had to be involved. We couldn't be passive, because they're using tacit agreement at that level. They're standing before God and saying, we're agreeing to this. That's why they, like you said, with the actors and all that, they put all that out there, because we're agreeing to it.
100%.
Yeah, so that's how they're doing it, and it's really prevalent now because they're moving weapons. This is the first time they've ever moved weapons commercially in our recent history, anyway. So previous to that was always done by armies and like the actual weapons. They're getting our agreement all the whole way. So we have to be involved. And Enoch the earth had to cry out, and I believe the earth is crying out, and then men had to cry out. And if we don't, they can't get involved. There's rules of engagement. So you'll see that if you just kind of read the story with that in mind. There was 4 watchers or 4 archangels that were watching, and they saw all this horrendous stuff going on, and blood, and all the same things, similar things that are happening now with the adrenochrome and all that stuff. Right. Was happening back then, and they didn't do anything until the earth cried out, and then men cried out. Then they went before God, who was the judge, and said, you know all this, but you're not doing anything. Right. But since men have now, we're witness that men have now cried out, and they want to petition you, then the orders started coming down, and the same angels who couldn't go in before now had the orders, like sheriffs from the court, to go in and pass judgment. So we have to have that happening again. That's another thing the NOL does. It creates that very clear case where people are saying no, and they're doing it in the correct way. They're saying actually yes, if, like a conditional acceptance. So it's all in honor. There can be no chance of appeal, and we can literally shut this thing down. Yes, and create heaven on earth. Yes. Now, I know you have your son. Do you have time for I know our listeners have questions for you? Yep. He's got his costume on now, so he'll be good. But
Okay, good. Okay, so for those of you who have questions for Cal, please raise your hand. I'm not going to be answering any questions in the chat. We love this to be, more engaging when you become part of it. So, okay, DK.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Kyle. So just a little bit about me, and this will give you context for the question I wanted to ask you. I'm a writer. I have a Substack, and if you don't know what Substack is, it's just a site for writers where they can grow an audience. Anyway, one thing I'm doing is trying to notify authorities and keep track of this about things that are going on. So this past weekend, I sent letters to the health minister, to Christina Tam. So the health ministers, Yves Duclos, Teresa Tam, and then the health minister in Quebec, basically just asking them to look into these vaccines, because there are things found in them that are not purported to have been in them. So my question now to you is, what type of letter can I send to them, which they cannot ignore, which they would have to take action on?
if you're asking, you have just put them in a position above you, because you're asking, petitioning, supplication, application, all those words are begging. The minute you ask anything, the answer can be no. It's a legitimate answer. Yeah. So you have to go to what's called a demand, and it sounds rude and like, oh, but you actually have to have what's called a formal demand. So you have to have the right to demand it. So you got to create your right based on you were born in Canada, or if it was me, I would be going, according to the Hudson Bay Charter, you can't have laws that are repugnant to the common law. I hereby formally demand that you answer these questions or respond to these claims or whatever it is, right? But don't give them an option to say no. It's like you must answer. That's how the NOL is kind of set up. We don't use the word demand, but because it's a commercial, so it's a negotiation, because they started the negotiation. But if you're going to start something, you want to get in the position where you can demand these the answers that you're looking for.
But I can still do it through Canada Post. Does it matter if my name is in all caps?
I would try not to do that, and I would call yourself a man as well.
Okay,
yeah.
Not a citizen, but a man. Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you, DK. Do not ask. Bring demand.
Yeah, I want to be polite, but sometimes being polite is not the right thing to do nowadays. This will be a learning experience to me too, and I'll document it. Actually, I'll put my Substack in the chat, so if anyone wants to go, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was looking up demand in the Black's Law Dictionary, and it said it's the second strongest word in law next to claim. If you have a claim and you have a demand based on that claim, you're in the strongest position you could possibly be in man's law.
Thank you, Cal. Brian.
You were talking about the trial you had when you came into the courtroom and the judge ran out.
Yeah.
Have you ever found out why the judge ran out?
Yeah, because I bonded the case. That was the first time we ever bonded a case.
Okay.
And then when I was out helping others, I would bond their cases, and judges were stepping down, not coming in the room. There was one time I was at work, and then I thought, well, I'll go by in the afternoon and see if they haven't called his case yet. And the freebie lawyer's running to me at the front door. Where were you this morning? And I'm like, I'm not obligated to be here. Well, we couldn't call the case unless you were here. Really? I saw all kinds of this behavior. Like I've got 20, 30 stories like that. It's just overwhelming. It's not just, a little bit, I tend to downplay things, but it was a lot of stuff that I saw. It became very clear that law merchant and operating in commerce was the key to shutting all this down. They couldn't get on top of it. Like that's their ceiling.
So when you bond a case, you put basically a claim in for a significant amount of money.
Yep. 300 million usually.
That was 300 million.
The 300 million was a promissory note that was put in while I was in jail to get me out.
Okay.
So they wrote a habeas corpus, and traditionally a habeas corpus is supposed to come with a bond, and only merchants and nobles could do it. You got to go see the history of these things, because they've been watered down and they still use the words, but it's not, you don't get the essence of it unless you go back in time to see how it actually operated. So anyway, they did a habeas corpus and gave a promissory note, and they took the promissory note out of the file, and so they accepted it. And then they just didn't let me go. And then on my last day there, she sentenced me to, well, my whole sentence, what she said was, you're guilty. And I'm like, okay, 5-year driving prohibition, $1,200 fine, 1 day in jail, and 59 days credit, because I'd already done 60 days by then. So first of all, I had to get rid of that 5-year driving prohibition, because I knew that I would just be constantly back in jail. It would just be a revolving door. So I told her, I said, that's going to cause me harm. She goes, oh, okay, well, we'll drop that. And the prosecutor's like, what? So I said, so on the 59 days credit, I'd like to talk about that. She goes, okay. A promissory note was put in for my incarceration. We bantered back and forth about that. But anyway, she agreed that it was there. And I said, well, it has to equal the 59 days credit because it has to balance to zero. So, and she goes, okay. She says, how much was the promissory note? I said, $300 million. And she didn't know. And I said, I want that in cash or certified check or gold. Don't hand me another piece of paper, because that's what she was trying to do, is give me 59 days on a piece of paper to balance the other piece of paper. But I caught her, and so it didn't balance. And then it was the collecting of the 300 million that it led to more, because every time they, kept not honoring their system, it just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where they just left me alone. And to the point where I'm standing in front of Buckingham Palace shutting down a portal. This is how far this went.
Wow, that's incredible.
And had they paid me, none of that would have happened.
Right.
Had they not put me in jail, none of it would have happened. You see, everything they did backfired to the point I'm shutting down a portal in London.
And you never did see a penny of the 300 million?
Nope, don't need it. What I got out of that is those commercials? Priceless.
Yeah.
I yield.
Thank you, Brian. Great question. Thank you. Christina, go ahead.
Hey, Cal, I wish I knew then what I know now. When I was in jail for police assault back in 2016 with broken ribs I had, I wonder, are we currently possibly in martial law, and what does martial law have? So that's one of my questions, because we wouldn't know maybe that we're actually in martial law. And then you mentioned your merchant number is your SIN number. So that means that there's a trust, there's a bond on that number. Our uppercase letters is a corporation. It's our entity, it's our straw man, right?
It's a straw man, yeah.
There's a bond on that name, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So then how do we actually, or is it necessary to access that bond? And can we, and is it the same in the States where it's traded on the stock exchange? In the United States it is. And is Canada as a corporation, is it a subsidiary of the United States, which is a subsidiary of the UK, which is a subsidiary of the Vatican? Is that kind of the way it goes on? So those are a few questions.
Yeah. Canada is the Hudson Bay Company. There's these old companies going back to the 1600s. The East India Trading Company, the Hudson Bay Company, the Virginia Company. If you look these up, they're still operational. So you got to go back in time. You'll learn a lot by going back in time, like trying to find the history. And I know there's a lot of lies out there. Canada is the Hudson Bay Company with a changed name. That's all. And you'll read that in the Hudson Bay Charter. They're allowed to change their name and their seal. So Canada has a seal and it's now called Canada, but it's operating under that charter. The charter is owned because it's a monopoly corporation. So it was surrendered in 1868. They passed the Rupert's Land Act, which was the terms for the surrender of that document, which is 1 year after they formed the Dominion called Canada. They said, okay, now that we've got Canada to compete with you, we want that document back. So 1868, surrender the things. It took them a couple of years because there was a Red River uprising, and because they didn't tell anybody, they were just doing this. So anyway, the Hudson Bay Charter was officially surrendered with a deed of surrender to Victoria, her successors and heirs. So it's owned by whoever has possession of, not physical possession, but legal title to it, if you want to put that. Whoever's the owner of that document owns what is known as Canada as a corporation. It's registered in the United States at the SEC because it issues securities, bonds, like savings bonds and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we have here in Canada. It's most likely that Charles is the owner of what we know as Canada, because it would pass to Victoria's successors and heirs. So Elizabeth had it. And that's why when Elizabeth came over here in 1982, when they were trying to form a country, because the BNA Act had been repealed by Victoria after she got the Hudson Bay Charter, because she didn't need that anymore. Now let's go back to business. But nobody knew that. Everybody thought it was a country, and then we still think it's a country. But prior to that, everybody knew it was the Hudson Bay Company, and they would actually shoot at them. We've stopped shooting. We now vote. But if we knew what it was, we would start shooting again, because you can't force people to do commerce. It's just, it goes against everything that makes any sense. So that's what we have here in Canada. In my opinion, the Vatican and the thing in London and Washington, D.C., those are city states. They're kind of running things. And I was always told, that the Queen couldn't go into that square mile in London and had to walk behind the Lord Mayor. That changed for me a couple of months ago, because I watched it live when Charles did his oath to the Scottish Church. 178 people showed up there with no notice, like 2 days notice, like they dropped whatever they were doing to be in there, and they watched him sign this thing, and then they signed it. So this is not observing something, they're participating. And guess who was in the room? Lord Mayor of London. So it's backwards. He needs that oath just like everybody else, the Vatican and all of them. I believe that the King's oath, the English King is holding the oath for at least a third of the world, maybe more, because it's not clear. But it holds that whole spiritual, those angels that I talked about in Enoch, that's the agreement that holds those beings back. So we have to attack that, show the default on that in front of them, and then in front of the Most High God. Then the orders will come down and they'll shut this thing down in a heartbeat.
All
So-
right, okay, and then the merchant, the bond itself?
Yeah, that's off the birth certificate. So the birth certificate is a trust indenture.
Right.
It's an extract from a record of live birth that your parents, you can look at it a couple of ways. They abandon you at sea if you're talking Admiralty. If you're talking on the land, then they've abandoned you to be a ward of the state. So you're considered like an orphan. And again, go back in time to the time of the Black Plague when there was lots of orphans. They put them in these workhouses and work camps. They were indentured, but they weren't slaves. So there's a whole thing of rules around that. When you actually look at that, you'll go, that's what's going on right here. That's what we're all in that situation. And you could get out of those work camps if you understood it. But most of them couldn't read. They would post it right on the door. Here's how you get out of here. If you don't teach them how to read, you know what I'm saying? So we're in that situation too, where the laws and the procedures are there, but they're not shown to us. They're not taught in school and all that. So you have to kind of find them. And so I've found some, and I'm using them to great success. And so it's kind of like that. So there is the Sesta KV Trust does exist, and that's how I was able to write most of my instruments. You don't have to have those backing, but I back them with that. That brings the IRS in as the collector, and that's why the judges are running out of the room.
Brilliant.
Right, great, thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Great questions. Susan, go ahead.
Great to have you on here, Cal. It's such an interesting conversation. I just have one question, and you've kind of answered it. You know, the whole claim of life thing, like taking back my birth certificate or owning it. Do you actually have to go through that procedure where you file it and actually claim it, or can you just act it? Like you were saying, those kids, had they just known, they walk out the door. You just have to be it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a trust indenture. So they've given you, like, it, again, go back in history. What's an indenture? They used to cut any split title documents, literally cut them with a jagged scissors, so that the two pieces would join together. And then, okay, here you have this piece, you have that piece. You both have to have, you can't, neither one of you can control it because you only got half of it. So that's what an indenture is. So going back in history. So what they've done is they've given you something, they just didn't tell you what it is. So it is for you to operate. So you don't have to do a bunch of things. It's already yours. They had to give it to you. And it's a valuable token. So you can, if you can figure out what to do with it, I sent it to the US Treasury. And it's
Your
not
birth certificate?
Yep.
Like the physical birth certificate.
Yep. With some writing on it. And I told them, I'm ledgering this thing because it is a security. I'm ledgering it here at the US Treasury for your use. But from time to time, I'm going to write instruments on it. Do we have a deal? If you don't go for this deal, send everything back within 7 days and the deal's off. If you keep it, then there's a tacit agreement.
When you say instruments, you mean you could take money out of it, but what are you taking money out of for?
No, I don't. You don't take money out of it in that way. I can write instruments. So instruments are commercial instruments. The main ones are promissory notes and bills of exchange.
Okay.
And bonds, yeah.
So could you use that to write a bond on somebody else's court case?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
You're ensuring the transaction, whatever's going on. And it can be anything. Like, again, go back in history. When you look at how bonds started, it had to do with shipping mostly because we had pirates like Rupert out there stealing the cargo off the ship, or stealing the whole ship, or killing the crew, or stealing the crew. Like it was on and on and on. So you had to have insurance on the boat itself, bottom re bond. You had to have insurance on the captain, you had insurance on the cargo, and you had to have insurance on the crew. So there was bonds for all these things. So that's to make sure that thing, when it left there, it had that crew on there, this cargo and that captain, and it should get here with that exact amount. And so there was insurance. There was all kinds of scams along with that, but that's how it is. So the court is trying to run some kind of business deal, but they're involving men and women. You know, they bring them in under a fictitious name, but that man and woman is. That's why when she said I'm giving you a 5-year driving prohibition, that's my driver, the driver's license. But I said it's harming me. I'm a traveling salesman. I can't not drive. I can't not travel. So she had to drop it because I brought it up that way. That's going to harm me. So she got rid of it. So when you bond one of these undertakings, like a court case, there are bonds already on it, and if you out bond them, like if your amount is higher, then you move into the position that you're in. I hate to say control, but it's kind of like that.
So when you're doing it on the treasury, like what's the limit that you could use?
When the ink runs out of there.
Really?
Or
Wow.
if I run out of paper or I run out of ink.
Wow.
That said, if you're going to do, we were taught doing instruments, if they're too big, they cannot interface with the system. Put it this way, if you wrote an instrument that doubled the money supply, it just rocks the whole world. Like they can't do it. So that's the extreme.
Okay, well, thank
So,
you.
so it has to be something that causes them to pay attention.
Mhm,
It can't be $1, otherwise like,
yeah,
but it can't be so big that it tips the thing over.
wow. Okay, thank you.
Great question, Susan. Thank you. Aaron, go ahead.
Hi, it's great to hear you, Cal. Appreciate it a lot. I have a question. It's bothered me a lot for quite a while now, and that is that if fraud and deceit will render a so-called contract null and void, how are these court cases allowed to even be considered legal? Or a lot of other things, like a lot of things that are happening in government that are affecting us, and it's all by deceit. You know, they just haven't told us and so forth. So can't you just stand up and say, no, I'm not agreeing with this, and it just falls to the floor? It's no longer operational.
Yeah, agreement is more than you think. Like tacit agreement is a thing. And I can tell you this, if you voted, you agreed.
Yes, thank you, Cal.
There's a saying that says, you know, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain. That's absolutely untrue. It's backwards.
Yeah.
You can only complain if you didn't vote. If you voted, you have just said, I agree with this system, no matter what the outcome, and that's the outcome you're getting. See what you just described, deceit, lying, blah, blah, but you agreed to it. So agreement, yeah, I'm telling you. Your name is on a thing. You went, yep. Carry on. Okay. Oh, I don't like you. I'll wait for the next guy 4 years from now. Ding. Oh, another crook. Oh, really? Oh, that's surprising. Ding. You know when I caught on to this, I was his age. I was 8 when the first Trudeau came in, and we lived in BC, so it was on fairly late at night. When he won, my mom was talking to the neighbor lady, and they said, "Oh, he's so young, and everything's going to be different." I didn't know anything. You know, I didn't know anything. I'm a kid, right? But I heard the word, "Oh, everything's going to be so different." And so I got up the next morning thinking, "Yep, my mom knows everything, and so everything's going to be different." I walked outside and I looked around. And I went, blue sky, green grass. No, never voted in my life. Nothing was different. And it's true. I know that's a really simplistic thing, but if you think about when this Trudeau, who we all hate at this point, when he came in, it was to get rid of the last guy we hated at the time he was going out. And they just moved the next one in. And if you can't see that, that's repeating with this guy I can't pronounce his name, but you all know who I'm talking about because I don't really follow it. It starts with a P. You can see they're setting you up for the next guy, and he's going to come in, and then 4 years from now, everybody's going to be, I hate that guy. Just repeats. But you voted for him. So
that would also include other things in the system then, like talking about, say, court cases and just everything in general.
Yeah. You know how many every time I came to court, your address.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing about mail. Again, go back in history. Mail went to the post office. Everybody went to the post office to get their mail. You know, towns were small. And so, you know, and if you go way back, it was a post in the middle of the village. That's post, like you stuck it on a post. That's where the word comes from. Then it was post offices. They built buildings around it. And so everybody went to the post office, you got your mail. That's still in effect. The government came in, and if you look at almost every government, one of their reasons for them existing is post, like mail service. So they're taking the mail, the stamp got the letter to the post office, they're bringing it from the post office to your house as a benefit. If you have any benefits, you have to bear the burden. Another one is if you have a lawyer, and I watched, they asked me every time I went to court, they asked me what my address was. And I kept saying, you ask me that every time. And it's always the same. Well, we're going to ask again. So that tells you that your address is important. So when I was locked up for 60 days, they asked me if I wanted to speak to duty counsel. Every time I was in there, no, thank you. You don't want to speak to him. Well, he's right there. They would bring him right in the room. No, no, thanks. One time they had the sheriff come with my file. And I was sitting in the room waiting to go into the courthouse. They bring you up some stairs and then you're in a little holding thing. And he opened the door. So he was still standing in the courtroom and he yells, Washington. And I just kept looking at the floor because I didn't want to answer to the name. And he goes, Washington. And I kept looking down. He must be talking to somebody else in here, even though I'm the only person in here. And then he says, Washington, the third time. And then he said, Teeny, which is how I wanted them to address me. And so I looked up and he looked at me with disgust. And then, so they started in with, would you like to speak to duty counsel? No, thank you. Well, he's right here. Yeah, I know. He's right here every time. And I still don't want to speak to him. This time the guy gets up from the front row, walks over to the sheriff who just looked at me in disgust. The sheriff hands him my file or a bunch of papers. I don't know what it was. And the guy comes and sticks it on the railing. I'm standing in the penalty box there. And I had to physically turn my body around and put my hands over my ears. So I was not engaged with him. They were looking to just get any kind of listen to him for a second or look at anything he's pointing. So he's pointing and I just went like this, closed my eyes and turned my body physically around. That same sheriff who looked at me in disgust not 2 minutes before stands up and starts yelling, the prisoner is indicating that he doesn't want to speak to that man. And that lawyer took off like a shot. He was, papers were flying in his jacket. I don't think he'd run in 50 years. And, he was waddling and it was just, I'm like, when I looked at the guy, like, where did that come from? The way he said it was like, get away from my prisoner or somebody's going to get shot. And he said it to everybody. And the judge was red in the face. She just like froze. So and when I was helping another guy, they did the same trick. And here's how far they go to get these agreements. They brought duty counsel in and he's standing at the back and goes, may I be of some service here, Your Honor? Yes, of course, that would be great. And the guy knew my friend from high school. And I'm going, no. He goes, oh yeah, I know that guy, I'll talk to him. So they go down into the cells and they talk. Then they come back up and they bring him up into the glass booth. The duty counsel guy, young guy, walks down there and just whispers something through the glass. So it's now in the public. He's listening to me. Another lawyer on cue walks in the door, has nothing to do with this case. He's a federal prosecutor with this massive book and he's got it open above his head. Your Honor, I need to bring this down to your attention. She takes the book. We have jurisdiction. I went, oh, you total play acting. Didn't read anything out of the book. It was just to show that they got jurisdiction because he talked to that lawyer. That's how far they go to get those agreements. Like it's more than you think. So that's the long and short of, these guys doing all these criminal things and we're not agreeing. We are.
Thank you, Cal.
Yep.
I remember you saying about they tried to get you to say your name and you kept giving them your nickname from your childhood.
Yeah. Well, they started with, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? I said, well, I don't know what my name is because, as far back as I can remember, there was a lady who I was told is my mother, but I really don't have any evidence of that either. But, she's been in my life the whole time. But anyway, that lady, when she wanted me to come home for dinner, she would yell out Teeny, which was my nickname. And then I would go home for dinner and all the kids called me teeny, and all these people that I think were my brothers and sisters, but I have no evidence of that either. Everybody called me teeny. So I guess, Your Honor, my name is, I wouldn't say that, but I guess my name is Teeny. And they're just like, so they all had to call me teeny in there. I wouldn't answer to anything else.
Good for you. I am like you. I agree with you 100%. I have never voted a day in my life because I knew that that whole system is the opposite of freedom, that when we vote, we're not allowing ourselves to step into freedom. So thank you for sharing that.
No, you've just agreed with the thing in principle. That's all they want.
Yes,
And when
exactly.
it drops to when it starts to drop below 50% voting, then they start to panic.
Yeah.
And I think they've even got compulsory voting in Australia, because everybody there is like
Amazing. Don, go ahead.
Hi, Cal.
Hi.
Thanks for being such a warrior for truth, for starters. Just backing up a little bit, I think you were referring to Pierre Poilievre there, were you not?
Yeah.
Okay. Aren't those politicians all selected? They're not really elected by the people?
No, they're selected.
Yeah.
You can tell that guy's going to, mark my words, that guy's going to be the next prime minister.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all. I knew Trudeau was going to be the prime minister.
Yeah.
It's you can see it, like they telegraph it. Yeah.
Is there any, if you're a registered voter but you haven't voted, is it necessary to remove yourself from the list?
Yes, I would say so, because they're even if you didn't vote, you're still agreeing that voting is how we want to run things here.
Even if you don't vote?
Mhm.
Okay.
And you can have yourself removed.
Yeah. Okay. I've watched 3 or 4 of your videos, and I like say so much information to absorb, eh?
Yeah,
Is there an actual protocol or step-by-step process for some of this stuff on your website or?
Well, our notice of liability is definitely step by step, country to country and agenda to agenda, somewhat procedures of how to set it up, and then what we have a video series on every line, like word by word, line by line, to explain the depth of the document. And
okay.
yeah, so you can glean a lot from that, because it's more about principles and how things work, and you go, oh yeah, well, I can see how that could work over there, right?
Mm-hmm. Is there anything on traffic law and stuff like that, like driver's license, registration, insurance, any of that?
Again, not particular, but those are all part of the whole thing as well. Those are all agreements. I haven't renewed a license in 20 years or something. And here in BC, the only place they can collect fines of any kind is when you renew your license or your insurance. So they can't, fines to me are just pieces of paper. I can just toss them. They will never come and collect them.
So then if you get pulled over by a police officer and you have nothing to show them, what do you do?
I deal with it at the time. But see, if I don't have the license, I'm not subject to the Motor Vehicle Act. So they have to, get something else to happen. If the car that I'm driving is registered, I can't really do much about that. So they will likely impound it, but I just go and pay and get it back. There's not much they can do.
Okay.
And to tell you the truth, Don, the last time that I had any dealings with police while I was driving was a liquor stop, and the guy just said, he asked me one question and he didn't ask if I had anything to drink, and he didn't ask for a license. He said, "Where were you?" I said, "Downtown." And he said, "Okay, look at my glasses." Shone a light up at my face. "Have a nice evening." And again, one of these are not the droids you're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is how my life is kind of like that, and I don't know. I do know that it's happening, but I don't know like, I'm not trying to make it happen, if you know what I'm saying. It's just
Yeah.
happening.
Wherever you think is what you draw into your experience is what. you're
Yes,
trying to-
and I'll tell you this, each time that I've had those, the last times that I've had anything like that where I kind of vanish, I will tell you this, if there is a mechanism, I consciously do not go into fear. Because
Yeah.
that's the first offer that comes to me, is like, oh, okay, get anxious, get scared, what are you going to do? And I go, no, it is what it is, and I'm just going to let it happen. And I'll deal with it as it comes. I'm not gonna be going to fear about it. And you know, that includes you know, the thing when I came back from London in Toronto, where they were really looking for somebody or something, and I think it was me. And I wouldn't go into fear, and everything in my environment was trying to make me go into fear. And I just, nope, not doing it, not biting, and then I walk right out the door.
Excellent, Cal. You're showcasing that this can happen, and you're giving all of us so many tools and ways of being that we can step into.
Yes, and people did it with the masks. The masks weren't so, there wasn't, the consequences aren't heavy, but a lot of people, when I told them, you know, how to act, instead of going and arguing about masks, don't think about it, don't talk about it. And people were walking all through the store, and like, nobody seems to see that I have a mask, that I don't have a mask on. And one guy did it all the way through the store, talked to it was a hardware store, so he's talking to people, like, you know, about stuff or whatever he was in there for. And then he mentioned masks at the cashier, because the cashier had him, you know, those masks, they don't really do anything. Whoa, you don't have a mask on. And he told me that. He says, I walked through the whole store, talked to all kinds of stuff. Nobody said anything until I mentioned that. I said, I told you.
Exactly. We have incredible power.
We do.
Yes, we just need to claim it. I have posted Cal's website in the chat. I do believe a few people have posted it in the chat as well. Oleg, go ahead. Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Hey, Carl, I'm scheduled to appear into the court in the end of June. So I wonder, how can I speed up this learning process and really how to appear in the court? It will be the first appearance, and it's scheduled to be remotely. Would that be easier to handle it remotely via the Zoom? And how to get prepared to this prosecution?
Well, it depends on what you want to do, and I don't know what it's about, but and I can't give legal advice, but if it's something that you can challenge the jurisdiction for, you know, a quo or rento is the way to do that. That's a writ from the common law. And if they don't answer, you're kind of running out of time. You know, you've only got, you know, a few weeks, so you have to get going on that pretty quick in order to give them time to answer. But if you have like, based on what I said earlier about Canada and there's no constitution and all that, if you really understand that without the British North America Act, or the, you know, or the Constitution Act, which is the British North America Act with a different name, there is no parliament. So I don't know if you understand what that means, but whatever it is that they're dragging you in on can't exist because there's no parliament to pass it.
Exactly.
And that's why they don't have royal assent, because they can't. So
they act with these court appearances on a low level, but there is no, on the high level, there is no support from the parliament, as you said, because there is no parliament.
Yeah, there's no, you see, the British North America Act creates parliament. That's the document that creates it. And the legislatures in the 4 provinces at the time, and then other provinces were added. But so that's what creates those entities. That got repealed in 1893 by Victoria, who passed the British North America Act. And so then the parliaments don't exist. And when you put that in a document and then you go, oh, by the way, I'm bonding this case for $300 million and there is no parliament, that's when the judge goes, well, I think I'm just going to step over here.
Okay.
Because he's liable.
Right.
It would be like me saying to you, Oleg, yeah, you broke the law, so I'm charging you $300. Pay up.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Who,
Just
like,
turn it-
who am I? That's what you would say to me. Like, who are you? Oh, I'm a judge. Really? Yeah. See, I got the black thing on. Look at the room that I'm in.
Right.
Judge Judy.
Yeah, the court
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, Judge Judy's in a room. It's a TV set, but it looks like a courtroom, and she's wearing the stuff, but it's not a courtroom.
All theater.
It's theater. Yeah. So if the judge knows that you know that, and that you have to know it, this is another thing. It's not just firing stuff around. They don't want to participate. That's what I've just seen. I've just seen a lot of people running, like a lot of people running. Like I said, I could probably give you 30 stories of like all this kind of behavior.
You have to bring the law, Oleg. They're not going to give it to you.
Yeah, we pretty much I have to flip it around against them.
Exactly.
Yes. They don't have an answer. They will never say the Hudson Bay company. Never. I've never seen them answer this. So, but I know that's what it is. But all I say is, show me where your authority comes from in light of Queen Victoria took the enacting clause out of the British North America Act in 1893. And in 1982, the thing that Trudeau tried to pass, the only thing that gives it any authority is that royal proclamation. And the Queen put a subject in where she says this will come into effect, subject to 659 on this day, April 2nd, 1982. That subject has never been removed. And it has to do with English, parents having their children taught basically in English in Quebec, and Quebec will never sign off on that. Anybody from Quebec will no, that ain't happening. It's never happened. They tried twice with the Meech Lake Accord and Charlottetown Accord, both failed, and we're in limbo. 40 years they've been waiting for that act to actually come into force, and it hasn't. And Brian Peckford knows this. Anybody knows who Brian Peckford, because I can read between the lines when he says it, but he will not say what I'm saying. He just says, well, we've been running it for 40 years. We need to continue. No, we don't.
Oleg, thank you for being here.
Thank
and
you.
asking great questions. Thank you, Lucas. I think you added some documents or a PDF in the chat. Thank you very much. Brian, go ahead.
Just want to get a little feedback from you. You have a automobile. You travel in it on a regular basis. No?
No. But I travel in others.
Okay, because that's what I'm looking for is basically people using an automobile without registration, being unhassled on a regular basis, or getting video to support arguments that we shouldn't have to have a driver's license and registration.
Yeah, so I did that for over 2 years. Which culminated in 60 days in jail, like a trial.
Mhm.
And I was found guilty of driving without insurance. I had done a bond according to the Motor Vehicle Act at the time. They repealed all those sections, but we put a bond in with the finance minister, which is what it said in the Motor Vehicle Act. And we were taking financial responsibility. It said, give an instrument to the finance minister. They will be taken as taking financial responsibility. And then ICBC will give you a card, financial responsibility card, and a sticker for your windshield. And they refused to give it. So you're dealing with criminals. Because I'm half American, if that's a thing, I want to move to the States where I can do that kind of thing. It's happening down there a lot more. So then I'll get a car.
That's what I'm leading to, because I see a lot of Supreme Court precedents that say you don't need a driver's license registration in the US Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to find that information here, and it's very, very, very slim. And
Yeah, it's goes back to this whole thing that they can't pass the Motor Vehicle Act because they don't have a legislature. Now that will make the judge run out of the room, but it's not going to stop a police officer. And there's the problem, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So it's not universal. I probably ran into of all the police officers that over 2.5 years, I got pulled over at least once, on average once a month. And of all the police officers, maybe 3 understood what I was doing.
It's
And they
my
all-
it's my thinking that traffic court is a weakness that we can expose
Oh yeah.
easily. And I think that would be a good ground for us to expose the corruption of the justice system in general through the traffic court, and then it could grow from there. With that, I yield.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was doing in traffic, but they didn't have me in traffic court, and they held me in a remand for 60 days, and they put me in danger, just so you know. Like they're criminals. You're dealing with organized crime.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And so they're not above violence, using violence and putting you in harm's way and even paying to have you harmed. So that all said, God got me through all that, but you just, as long as you stay down in the real low traffic things, but yeah, you start driving out insurance, and it looks like you're successful, because I was successful. Here's the thing. I read the act so many times, I had it, I wouldn't say memorized, but I mean, I really knew it. I knew it better than all police officers, and better than most judges. So if they pulled me over, they could impound my vehicle, or I could have it towed to a private residence. And I had many arguments with officers. No, you can't. I said, yes, I can. No, you can't. Why don't you go back in your car and talk to somebody and see if I'm correct? And they come back, yeah, you're correct. Yeah, I told you. So now my friend lives right there. Like I would just point to the driveway right there. So that's where I want my van dropped. So they'd call the tow truck. I always carried $80 because it was a set fine for the fee for the tow truck, $78 or whatever it was. And so I always had to have $80 cash with me. And I would pay as soon as the tow, here's another thing I know, as soon as the tow truck had the hook on my van, the police officer would leave the scene every time. I'm like, oh, so that's procedure. It wasn't random. It was like, as soon as he has it clicked up, okay. They don't want to have any liability. I don't know what it is, but it's like, get out of there, flee the scene. So as soon as the cop would leave, like I said, hey, here's your $80, put my car down, and I would drive away. So I was able to do this, like I said, once a month, but it was costing me $80 a month to drive, which is less than the insurance. So I was beating the system, even though I was late for some things because I get pulled over, but I was still able to drop the vehicle and carry on. And so that's when let's put him in jail and then see what he does. So that.
And even with insurance, this is a contract that you do not get to negotiate.
No.
They set the price and you have to comply. So this is against all contract law.
Yeah.
You can't impose that I have to have insurance because there's no room to negotiate.
But this is a part of the Hudson Bay Charter. That's why I tell everybody to read that. You'll see that they had licensing and fines and all that. It was back then, it was canoes in the river mostly, but same thing. Like they're operating under that thing, man.
I yield.
Yeah.
We have about 2 more minutes. I just want to remind everyone to save the chat. Great stories, Cal. Awesome. Apple, go ahead.
Hi, I just have the same question about cars and auto insurance. So what if a person, I know a couple of people who are driving and they don't have license and they don't have auto insurance. And my concern always was like, what if something happened, like an accident? And you know, who is liable, and what will happen to those people who are driving?
Well, here in BC, I checked with a friend that I'd known since we were in our early 20s, and she'd worked for ICBC for that long, you know, so I was in my 40s then, I think. So she'd been at ICBC for 20 years. So I know in BC, and I phoned her and I said, is everybody insured automatically for somebody that doesn't have insurance? She goes, oh yeah, that's uninsured motorist. So everybody's covered by ICBC, but the person who's driving like that would have to fix their own car or take care of their own medical things. So you have to take responsibility for yourself. But everybody else would be covered by here in BC anyway. I don't know where you live, Apple, but
it's the same here. I used to be in the claims department for insurance for 14 years. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you're not causing anybody any harm.
What if the accident was bad and somebody like had injury?
Yeah, the insurance company would pay for the other person's injuries. The person driving without the insurance and without the license would not be covered. You have to take responsibility for yourself.
But does it mean that the person caused harm to somebody else?
You're talking about the accident itself.
Yes.
Well, even if they were insured, the accident would still happen. So it's not like it.
Okay, I see.
You know, the accident it happens anyway. So somebody got hurt. It's whether or not they're insured. That's what you're asking. So, which is what an accident is. Accident actually means includes, and the word includes can be expansive, is how we normally would think of it, but it can also be contractive. So means only includes.
Oh.
So in here in our Motor Vehicle Act, it said accident includes an intentional collision. So they just deem everything as intentional.
Wow.
That's how they can make these things about 60-40. You both intended for this to happen, so it's going to be a 60-40 split, and you can fix your car and you can fix your car. Or we'll fix your cars for you and then we'll raise your insurance until you pay us back. There is no insurance here. It's just brokering the deal. It's the biggest scam ever. I went to ICBC here and they have a bank in the ICBC building. The ICBC bank.
Oh.
Thank you.
Cal, we are so grateful to you. And I think somebody mentioned this, maybe it was Dawn, that you are definitely a word for truth. And how can we support you?
Well, you can join InPower and do the notice of liability. Join us. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a membership fee. It's very low for what you're getting, like as far as value. And it's just going to be even more ridiculous for what you're going to be getting once the bills are monetized back to you. I can't even explain it. But yeah, that's what we're offering, something that can do big changes worldwide. We're in 19 countries, and we're getting these results already in the last, since January, basically. And it's just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Fantastic, Cal. I look forward to having you on maybe in 6 months or so, because I know there's going to be quite a few of our members that are going to be signing up. We believe in membership as well. So I do believe that you're going to have quite a few people signing up. And I do believe they are going to be sending out notices of liability. And so we'll be hearing their stories and then sharing them with you as well.
Yeah, there's a couple that couple names I see in here, so
Jane just signed up.
that are already members, yeah, so.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cal, for everything you do. We so appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. What a great call. Every time we have this conversation, it just integrates into ourselves that just a little bit more, just a little bit more. So it's really important to be on these calls. Again, we have the Tuesday night call tomorrow night with Brian and Karen Hanna and Laura Jane. And then we have our forums. You can connect to our forums at lifeforcecanada.ca. All the information is there. Natural law, education. We cover health and well-being as we're exiting all of these corrupt systems and stepping in and creating our own under natural law. Thank you, everyone. Together we rise.
Thank you, Cal.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Cal.
Thanks, Cal.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Cal.
Thank you.
you all.
Oh, thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Cal. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cal.